In this video, we will take a look at adding integers with counters. The very first problem is 1 plus 2. I'm going to let the yellow side of the counter represent positive. So 1 positive token, and I add onto it 2 positive tokens, results in 3 positive tokens. I actually add 1, 2, and 3. The second problem is 7 plus 3. I start with 7 positive counters, and I add 3 positive counters to this. 7 and 3 yellow counters makes 10 yellow counters. I have 10 positives. I added 7 and 3 together. The next problem begins with -8 plus -5. So I need 8 negative counters, and I'm going to add to this 5 negative counters. All of the counters are red to represent negative. There are 13 red counters that are all negative. We actually added -8 and -5 to make -13. Next, I have -1 plus -2. I start with 1 negative counter, and I add 2 negatives on. All the counters are red. I end up with 3 negative counters. I added the values of -1 and -2. The next problem says 9 plus -7. I'm going to start with 9 positives, and I will add on 7 negatives. So I added to the situation 7 negatives. I can zero out 7 of these though, as there were 7 negatives. I can zero out 7 of them, and it leaves me with 2 positives. So while the problem says addition, I actually subtracted the values. The next problem is -4 plus 5. I start with 4 negatives, and I add to it 5 positives. I can match up a positive with a negative 4 times to zero out 4 of these, which leaves me with 1 positive. When I have 4 and 5 that are different signs, I actually subtract. Let's take a look at the first 4 problems. In these first 4 problems, we had either 2 positives or 2 negatives being added together. So when the numbers, which I will call A and B, when they have the same sign, then we would add the values together. In the last 2 problems, here A and B have different signs. And in this case, when A and B have different signs, subtract the values. Then we need to analyze which sign, whether a positive or a negative, ends up being our answer. From the 2 examples I have here, one would think that it always ends up being positive. But the reason that it ended up being positive is that there were more positives. A way to say this is the sign of the answer will match the sign of the greater absolute value between A and B. We can look here at -4 plus 5. If I take the absolute value of -4, I have 4. And if I take the absolute value of 5, I have 5. 5 is greater than 4, so I look back at 5 and notice it was positive, so my answer is positive.